A single miscalculation could change millions of lives overnight. India versus Pakistan was supposed to be a clean break in 1947. Two nations, two identities, problem solved. But the Partition of India, 1947, didn't just create borders. It created a rivalry that still shapes global headlines. And here's the catch. This isn't some distant regional feud. When the India versus Pakistan conflict heats up, markets react, oil prices wobble, and investors start recalculating risk. Even if you've never been to South Asia, the ripple effects can reach your job, your energy bill, and your country's security strategy. Most people reduce it to the Kashmir dispute and move on, but that surface-level take misses the real tension underneath. Decades of Indo-Pak wars, nuclear tests, and political narratives that keep the rivalry alive. It's like stress fractures in concrete. You don't see the damage every day, but pressure keeps building below the surface. Add India versus Pakistan nuclear tensions to the equation, and suddenly a border clash becomes a global risk scenario. South Asia geopolitics isn't just regional, it's interconnected with supply chains, defense alliances, and capital flows. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a rushed decision during the Partition of India 1947 set off a chain reaction that still influences global stability today. You'll see why Kashmir became the emotional and strategic core of the India versus Pakistan history, and why nuclear deterrence hasn't truly solved anything. More importantly, you'll understand what would actually need to change for peace to be realistic. Stay until the end, because the final question might flip how you think about this conflict entirely. Chapter 1. The Partition That Changed Everything, 1947. In 1947, one of the largest migrations in human history happened in a matter of weeks, and it wasn't voluntary. The Partition of India 1947 split British India into India and Pakistan almost overnight. Borders were drawn by a British lawyer, Cyril Radcliffe, who had never even visited the region before. Imagine being told your house is suddenly in a different country and that staying might get you killed. That chaos became the foundation of the India versus Pakistan history we're still living with today. And here's the uncomfortable question. Was the India versus Pakistan conflict inevitable from the very first line drawn on that map? More than 14 million people crossed borders in both directions within months. Trains arrived full of corpses. Entire villages vanished. Families were separated forever. This wasn't just political drama. It was trauma baked into national identity. And trauma shapes policy. Why does that matter to you right now? Because unresolved trauma between nuclear states fuels instability in South Asia geopolitics, and instability affects markets, oil prices, and investor confidence, including your retirement funds and energy bills. Now, here's where it gets personal. When leaders inherit a birth story soaked in blood, compromise looks like betrayal. Kashmir became the flashpoint almost immediately because both nations saw it as unfinished business. Think of it like a rushed divorce where no one clearly divided the assets, except the asset was land, water, and identity. The first Indo-Pak wars weren't accidents, they were extensions of a rushed decision. And if the foundation was cracked in 1947, what happens when that pressure builds under nuclear weapons decades later? Chapter 2. Kashmir, the land that started 3 wars. Kashmir looks like a postcard, snow peaks, rivers, valleys, but it's one of the most militarized places on Earth. Why would 2 countries risk everything over it? Because the Kashmir dispute isn't just about land, it's about identity, water, and unfinished business from the Partition of India, 1947. The region had a Hindu ruler, but a Muslim majority population, and when violence erupted, the ruler chose India. Pakistan rejected that decision immediately, and just like that, the India versus Pakistan conflict moved from political argument to open war. The first Indo-Pak wars began in 1947-48, ending with the creation of the Kashmir Line of Control, not a real border, just a ceasefire line. Think of it like drawing tape across a cracked windshield and pretending it's fixed. Wars followed again in 1965 and then in 1999 during Kargil. Why does this matter outside South Asia geopolitics? Because Kashmir controls key rivers that feed agriculture across Pakistan. If water access is threatened, food prices rise, inflation spikes, and political stability weakens. Water isn't symbolic, it's economic survival. And here's the political trap. Neither side can let it go without looking weak domestically. In democracies and fragile economies alike, leaders survive on perception. National pride becomes political currency. Imagine a CEO publicly giving up a core asset. Investors would panic. In this case, the investors are voters, and the asset is Kashmir. That's why India versus Pakistan war analysis always circles back to the same question. If both sides see compromise as defeat, what happens the next time a border skirmish spirals beyond control? Chapter 3. Nuclear Rivals, when the stakes became existential. Here's when the India versus Pakistan conflict stopped being regional and started being global. In 1974, India tested its first nuclear device. In 1998, Pakistan responded with its own nuclear tests. Suddenly, this wasn't just another chapter in India versus Pakistan history. It was a standoff between two nuclear-armed neighbors. Think about that for a second. Two rivals with decades of wars behind them now had weapons capable of ending millions of lives in hours, and that changed the math completely. This is where India versus Pakistan nuclear tensions enter dangerous territory. Both countries operate under the shadow of mutually assured destruction, meaning if one fires, both suffer catastrophic damage. But nuclear deterrence only works if communication is clear and mistakes don't happen, and mistakes do happen. After the Pulwama attack, 2019, airstrikes and retaliations pushed both sides closer to escalation than most people realized. Markets reacted, oil prices wobbled, investors watched closely. Because if conflict spirals, supply chains and regional stability in South Asia geopolitics get shaken, and that affects everything, from tech outsourcing jobs to energy flows. Here's the analogy. It's like two neighbors arguing over a fence while both are holding gasoline and matches. Deterrence keeps them from lighting it most of the time. But nationalism, miscalculation, or misinformation can shorten reaction times. Nuclear weapons didn't solve the Kashmir dispute. They froze it under tension. And when a frozen conflict cracks under pressure, especially in a fast-moving crisis, the world doesn't get much warning. So the real question becomes, in a region where politics and pride run hot, how long can nuclear restraint stay cool? Chapter 4. Religion, Identity, and Politics. What if the India versus Pakistan conflict isn't really about land at all, but about who each country believes it is? India was founded as a secular republic with a Hindu majority. Pakistan was created as a homeland for Muslims after the Partition of India, 1947. That identity split never disappeared. It hardened. Over time, the Kashmir dispute became more than territory. It became a symbol of religious legitimacy and national pride. And when identity is on the line, compromise feels like surrender. Political parties on both sides understand this deeply. Nationalism wins elections. Tough rhetoric boosts approval ratings. Media amplifies outrage because outrage drives ratings. In Kashmir, insurgency and militancy have kept tensions alive for decades. Every attack, every crackdown feeds the cycle. Why should someone thousands of miles away care? Because instability in nuclear regions affects global security budgets, insurance markets, foreign investment, and even tech outsourcing hubs that power Western companies. When South Asia geopolitics heats up, investors get nervous, and nervous markets move fast.
Think of it like a sports rivalry where both fan bases believe losing would erase their identity, except instead of a trophy, it's nuclear deterrence and real lives. Leaders may privately understand the risks of India versus Pakistan nuclear tensions, but publicly they can't appear weak. That's the political trap. Peace talks become risky career moves, so even if a ceasefire exists on the Kashmir Line of Control, the emotional battlefield never really cools. And when emotions drive policy instead of strategy, what happens during the next crisis?
Chapter 5. Can there ever be peace? Here's the paradox. India and Pakistan have fought multiple Indo-Pak wars, tested nuclear weapons, survived crises like the Pulwama attack 2019, and yet full-scale war hasn't returned since 1999. So does that mean deterrence is working? Maybe. Or maybe both sides are just managing a permanent standoff. Ceasefires along the Kashmir Line of Control have come and gone. Diplomatic back channels open quietly and close just as quietly. The India versus Pakistan conflict feels frozen, but frozen conflicts don't disappear. They wait. Now add a new variable, China. Beijing has deep ties with Pakistan and border tensions of its own with India. In South Asia geopolitics, that triangle changes everything. At the same time, India's economy has surged in recent years, attracting global investors, while Pakistan has struggled with debt and inflation. Why does that matter to you? Because economic strength affects military budgets, alliances, and supply chains. If instability escalates, it could disrupt trade routes, tech outsourcing, and energy flows that feed into global prices and markets. Think of it like two rival companies locked in litigation, while a third giant competitor quietly expands market share. Peace would require political courage, economic cooperation, and some resolution of the Kashmir dispute, especially over water from the Indus River system. But water scarcity, climate change, and rising nationalism complicate everything. India versus Pakistan war analysis often focuses on past battles. The real question is future leverage. If economic and climate pressures intensify, will deterrence hold, or will something small trigger something much bigger? The India versus Pakistan conflict isn't ancient history. It's a live wire. The Kashmir dispute still simmers along the Kashmir Line of Control, and India versus Pakistan nuclear tensions remain a reality, not a theory. Every election cycle, every border incident, every diplomatic freeze carries consequences beyond South Asia geopolitics. Why should you care? Because in a globalized economy, instability affects energy prices, investor confidence, defense budgets, and even the outsourcing hubs that power international businesses. Understanding this isn't academic, it's practical. But here's the empowering part. Outcomes aren't fixed. The India versus Pakistan history shows cycles of war, ceasefire, escalation, and restraint. Nuclear deterrence has prevented full-scale war since 1999, even after crises like the Pulwama attack 2019. That tells us something important. Leaders can choose caution. If you want to go deeper, read books like The Kashmir Conflict by Victoria Schofield, or explore serious India-Pakistan war analysis from policy think tanks. The more informed you are, the less likely headlines will manipulate your perception. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think nuclear deterrence truly keeps the peace, or just delays a bigger crisis? Is the Kashmir dispute still the core issue, or has economics changed the equation? And if you were advising leaders in New Delhi or Islamabad, what would you prioritize first? Subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep learning how geopolitics, economics, and power shape your everyday life.